Hello friends! Today I will be sharing with you my top 10 adult fantasy standalone books. Grab your dragons and gather around. Hi friends, my name is Lexi and welcome back to my channel. I have always been that Dungeons and Dragons girl, okay? I have always been the person who's wanted to own my own dragon. I've always been the girl who is obsessed with different fantasy fandoms and things. But I am more recently becoming more and more interested specifically in adult fantasy, and I am having a really good time. This is the first year that I actually read Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and can I just say, the man is a genius, okay? And I really wanted to share with you this list because I feel like standalone fantasies in the adult genre, they're actually kind of harder to find in my personal opinion. And I think it's because one of fantasy's greatest strengths is that it really builds worlds very slowly so that you can really fall in love with the characters and you can really see a lot of growth in character development. But listen, sometimes you want to spend an entire year dedicated to a fandom, and sometimes you just want like a quick in and out story, you know? Also, now I want In-N-Out burgers, but alas, I do not live in California. Also, a really quick thing I would like to just throw out there that I would love any recommendations in the comments. Again, this is my first year really delving into Brandon Sanderson, and I just really want to become invested in a lot of adult fantasy series. But also, if you have other standalone recommendations or if you have a really great YA series that you would like to recommend, I would love to hear that as well. Okay, having said all that, let's just go ahead and like delve right into all of the books that I have next to me. Okay. The first book is a little bit of a blend between surrealism and fantasy, if you will, and it is by one of the all-time greats, the master, the legend. That's right. It is by Neil Gaiman, and that is The Ocean at the End of the Lane. This book is one of the most iconic, most perfect, beautiful books that I've ever read in my entire life. It's a little mix of sci-fi, it's a little mix of fantasy, it's definitely got a lot of surrealism in it, and I also feel like it's very unique. I also think that this is one of those books that's going to divide a lot of its audiences. Even if you are a typical lover of fantasy, you might read this book and absolutely hate it. It's one of those stories where you are definitely divided. But if you are on team I love this book, then you really love this book. Like there's no in between. And I am this book's biggest fan. So this book is following an unnamed narrator, and he is going back to his family's house when one of his parents dies. When he goes there, he remembers that he had a best friend named Lottie, and he and Lottie used to pretend that the pond at Lottie's house was actually a massive ocean at the end of the world. Feeling very nostalgic, he actually decides to go back to Lottie's house and visit, and while he's there, he sits by the pond. The narration does something that I have never seen another book do, and that is where the narrator actually reverts back to being an 8-year-old boy. So the first part of the book is him as an adult, and then it reverses, and the entire narration is then told by an 8-year-old perspective, which makes this very unique because it actually reads a lot like a middle grade, but it's definitely not a middle grade because it deals with a lot of adult topics and it's very dark. And this is the summer when he is 8 years old and he really is forced to grow up. Without spoiling too many things, a monster basically is unleashed and he has to work with Lottie to try to get the monster back to wherever it came from. This is a book that is just dripping with nostalgia. If you want a book that's going to make you remember what it was like to be 8 years old, I don't know how, but this book really just feels like childhood. And I also feel like Neil Gaiman has so many amazing themes in this. One of the biggest themes that I took away was that children are really forced to grow up often before they're ready, and they have to deal with all of these big adult issues in their own way. Reading it is heartbreaking because you will remember some of the things that you had to grow up from before you were ready when you were very young as well. So much heart is in this book. I could not recommend this more. cover. I think it's beautiful, dripping with atmosphere, wonderfully nostalgic, absolutely perfect, and probably one of my favorite books of all time. The next book is a book that I've just discovered this year, and it's also fairly short, so if you're looking for kind of like a quicker read, highly recommend this. And that is going to be Piranesi, and this is by Susanna Clarke. This is such an interesting book, and it's so difficult to explain to people because you're not supposed to know anything about it, and that's what makes it great. Like, there's something that happens like in the middle of this book where you have kind of this moment where you are just like, wait, that's what's going on, and then you become really, really, really invested. So this book is following our narrator, who has been named Piranesi by someone named the other. And Piranesi lives in a house that seems to be never ending. And the house is a little bit like a maze, and there are all of these really magical things that happen in different areas of the house. Some parts of the house are flooded, some parts seem to have like wildlife in them, and the entire thing is almost like a hodgepodge of like old statues and artwork and documents. And Piranesi is basically trying to figure out where he lives, and he's trying to categorize different things in his house. I know it sounds weird, and like that's not a lot to go off of, and again, it doesn't really seem like a stereotypical fantasy, but it is so good. The woman is a genius. Please read this. I can't tell you more about it, but you're not gonna regret it, okay? This is a little bit of a cheat because technically it is part of a series. However, every single novella in this series you can read as like a standalone. So listen, I'm counting it, okay? If you don't want to read the series, you can just read this one book, and it is a complete story. And this particular book is for every single person who waited by their window for Peter Pan, but he never came, and we're still slightly salty about it. This is a book for all the people who looked for rabbit holes or checked their wardrobes for entrances into Narnia. Again, very sad, we never found those. Is this book gonna help you find an entrance into a magical new world? No, but I mean, you get to read other people do it, so it's better than nothing. And that is going to be Every Heart a Doorway, and this is by Seanan McGuire. The first time I read this book, I read it all in one night, and I was so enamored with it that I literally physically woke up my mother to tell her verbatim, plot by plot, all of the details. She was not happy with me that night, but I mean, yeah, there's nothing. She wasn't happy with me that night. The premise of the series and of this particular book is that this is following a group of children who all go to this very mysterious school, and it is run by a woman named Eleanor West. And the school essentially is lying to parents. They're saying that it is a rehabilitation center to try to like get their kids to get out of this delusion that they have that they went to another world. However, once the kids are at this school, they learn that the principal, Eleanor West, also went to another world, and that this is a place for those kids to wait safely for their worlds. It's also a place for them to start to learn to adjust back to reality in case there is never a chance that they're going to see their other magical worlds again. So like, picture a jaded Alice in Wonderland, you know, Peter Pan if he had come back and decided to grow up. Don't know why he would have. The kids from Narnia. I mean, if you think about it, it's pretty traumatic because like, especially the kids from Narnia, they went to Narnia and like those people became old. They had like wives and children. You mean to tell me that those people came back and they were just like cool with going to math class after having like kids and a wife back home? I would be filled with trauma too. And this particular book is following Nancy, who has come back from her other world and is now attending the school for the first time. And a big element of this book is that it's a murder mystery. Because yes, it gets even better than learning about all of these other magical worlds. All of them start to die. And so Nancy has to figure out who is killing all of these magical kids and teenagers, and she also has to protect herself because she is determined to get back to her world no matter what. Let's go with another fantasy that I read this year and discovered, again by Susanna Clarke, and this one is a little bit of a chunk, okay? And that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. Yeah. And when I say this one is chunky, like, I mean, you could take a person out with this book, okay? Like, you do not want this thrown at your head. I don't know why someone would throw it at your head, but I'm just saying. And I think that this is the only historical fantasy I have on this particular list. I've also heard that Susanna Clarke is considering doing a sequel, but as of right now in 2021, there is no sequel, and I don't think there would be a sequel for quite a while. This book takes place in the 1800s and early 1900s of London. London, and it opens up in autumn in a library of magicians who belong to a secret society. The magicians are questioning why magic has just gone away from London. They are magicians, but they are only magicians in theory. Like, they study old magic, but they actually can't do any magic themselves. When they decide to contact a man named Mr. Norrell, who says that he actually can produce magic, and then he does. Jonathan Strange is the only other magician who lives in the UK who can also do magic. I think he's initially from Scotland, I want to say. And they become friends, and Jonathan actually learns from Mr. Norrell, but then eventually they have very, very different ideas as to who can practice magic, and they soon become rivals. We follow them through different wars and through heartaches and pains, and we see so many horrible decisions made from, I think, both of them overall, and it's just fascinating. The entire thing really reads a lot like a series almost. Instead of one huge plot, every single chapter seems almost like its individual short story, and the entire thing connects in a way that I think is really, really brilliant. I will say I feel like the ending is slightly unsatisfied, so I do actually hope someday Susanna Clarke does do a sequel, but I thought everything about it was great. Pick this up especially if you are one of those people who's really interested in a lot of world building and a lot of specific explanations on how magic works, because I feel like this did a great job. Also, this is a mini series, so if you don't want to invest all that time reading this, but you still want to check out the story, you might want to check out the mini series. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard it's really good. Next up, let's go ahead and jump to an urban fantasy. I love this book so freaking much, you guys. If you are a person who really likes a lot of morally gray characters and a lot of twists and turns in your fantasies, I could not recommend this more, and that is An Unkindness of Magicians, and this is by Kat Howard. This book has so many different elements that I absolutely love. Okay, let me back it up and tell you what it's about. In this particular world, we are following a group of magical families who all live kind of in like the upper crust of New York. Okay, we're talking rich, super powerful, and very, very magical people, and they are all out for blood and power, and it is just a delight. In this story, all of these families actually compete, I think every single 10 years, for magical dominance. All of these very, very powerful and wealthy magician families actually enter in one member of their family to compete in these magician games. They're called magicians, but you know, like they're basically wizards and witches, right? The games don't have to be deadly, but inevitably, like, everyone dies, so I don't know what to tell you. It's like the Goblet of Fire, okay? And the person who comes out a victor, they get like a supercharge of energy, a supercharge of magic, and inevitably, like, it gets their family to be more powerful, more wealthy. So there's one family who has always been the most powerful, and they think that they are absolutely going to win. But there are all of these different players this year, and everyone's really been training. Everyone's been studying up on like dirty tricks on this. And there is one player who people never suspected would come back, and she is out for blood. It is so good. If you love twists and turns, if you love seeing people play dirty, if you love the drama that comes with a lot of fantasy, I think you're really gonna love this. The next book is also by Seanan McGuire, and this book is unlike any other fantasy I've ever read because it's a little bit of a blend of genres as well. So it's a little bit of like a sci-fi mixed in with some fantasy, and that is Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. If you have not read this, I think you should. This book is about two twins named Roger and Dodger, and they've essentially been created by, I'm just gonna call him their dad, right? And it's this person who is trying to make gods. One of his most radical experiments is going to be through Roger and Dodger. And the story itself is about them and their journey and the things that they are put through to see if they can become gods. And the book actually opens up with one of the most iconic, gripping ways possible. You open it up and it opens up with the word failure, and it says, timeline, 5 minutes too late, 30 seconds from the end of the world, which shows you right away that the stakes in this book are incredibly high. I feel like this book does a great job at playing with timelines and with time loops. I also really like this because it paralleled a fake story in the world about two protagonists who are essentially like Roger and Dodger, and they are going through a traditional like fantasy story where they fall into another world. And I just feel like it's a great blend of like traditional fantasy storytelling along with this really interesting modern day fantasy with sci-fi elements. It's really, really cool. It's dark, it's very gritty, it's very gruesome, but I highly enjoyed it and I highly recommend. The next book is a book that I wasn't sure I was initially going to put onto this list because I feel like this mostly involves Greek mythology, and I feel like that's kind of its own category. However, the entire book is about a witch, and like witches are magic, so I think you could argue that this is one of the most important books on this list because technically this is about a character who was the first witch to ever exist. And that is going to be Circe by Madeline Miller. And yes, I did enjoy this. This book is following Circe, and Circe is on quite a journey because no one in her family likes her, and we hate them for it. Circe is a daughter of the gods, essentially, but she is not as beautiful as a traditional god is, and because of this, she's kind of like cast aside. Like, people don't find a lot of value in her, and she also doesn't seem to have the raw ability that other gods have. Like, some have an affinity with like nature, some have an affinity with light or with, I don't know, like stuff that gods are good at, you know what I'm saying? And Circe is talentless, so she doesn't really seem to fit in with the gods and they don't really know what to do with her. However, Circe soon discovers that if she mixes elements found in nature, she can actually create power, which like AKA she's learning how to do spells, and like we love that for her. Severus Snape could never, you know? But she does this during a time when the gods forbade magic and forbade making magic because they thought that that was a serious threat to them. They thought if it's possible to learn how to produce power yourself, then you could challenge the gods. And because of this, they punish Circe and they ban her to an island so that she's totally isolated and completely by herself. I think a lot of these books have very specific strengths, and I think that this book's biggest strength is that it has incredible themes of resilience and of self-love and of basically just like being a badass in life. I really, really enjoyed this. I loved the classical form of writing. Madeline Miller's writing voice is stunning. 10 out of 10 book. I highly recommend it. The next book I sadly cannot find. But anyways, that book is The Night Circus, and this is by Erin Morgenstern. This is a book that I think attracts readers who just want to feel magic in some way. And I feel like Erin Morgenstern really conveys that magic feeling through her writing. So it's a book that opens up with two magicians making a bet, and the bet is that they can both raise the ultimate magician, and they have a blood oath that locks them both in. One of them has a daughter named Cecilia who is very, very gifted at creating magic herself, and then the other one finds an orphan who has all of this magical abilities. And these two children are raised to learn how to do and create magic themselves. And eventually they are entered into a duel, and the duel is the Night Circus. There's a magical circus that travels around. The entire thing is run solely on magic. The duel between the two is who can produce the coolest magical acts in this circus. And that's kind of how like they win the duel, is like by showing that they're the more powerful or more capable magician. Yes, they do fall in love. It is a little bit like a Romeo and Juliet tragic thing, and it's beautiful. I would say that the plot is not the point of this story. The point of this story is to make you feel like you are a viewer of the Night Circus. It's to take you out of your own mundane head and world, and it's to make it feel like the magic and whimsy is real. And I feel like Erin Morgenstern does that beautifully. I find that the main criticism of this book is that the plot isn't as well fleshed out, and I would agree with that. I don't necessarily think that is the point of the story though. I think that this is for people who want to be transported. It absolutely transported me. I think it does a phenomenal job, and I love it so freaking much. On to our last two. The next one is one that I highly recommend specifically for the winter season, which is the time that I'm filming this now. So if you're looking for a really, really great fantasy that is dripping with winter magic, then you might want to pick up this book, and that is Spinning Silver, and this is by Naomi Novik. This is a book that is following 3 different perspectives, and they are all women. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I always forget the third perspective, so I'm just gonna talk about 2. One of the perspectives is a girl, and she belongs to a family where the father is a debt collector. He is really bad at his job because he's too nice, and he lets everyone go with all of their debts. And because of that, their family is currently starving. And so this girl is like, you know what? It's cool, Dad. You know, you can stay home. And she decides to go out and just collect the debts herself. And she's a little bit of a badass. Like, I would not want to mess with this girl. She is so good at collecting debts and then turning around and investing the money that she gets this rumor said about her that that she can turn silver into gold. And this gets the attention of a very, very powerful winter king. He's the king of winter, as the title suggests. He's very powerful and he doesn't like her because he is now threatened by this girl. And so he says, okay, I'm gonna give you silver and you're gonna turn it into gold. That is her storyline. It's a little bit of like a play on Rumpelstiltskin. The second storyline is following a girl. Her storyline kind of takes place in a place that is reminiscent to Russia. And she has to marry, I think, the Tsar of Russia or the equivalent of that basically. And she really doesn't want to. And he does not seem interested in her at all. And he has a secret that he is hiding from her. And this girl discovers that she has a very secret and cool magical ability. She can actually walk through mirrors and into other worlds. And I freaking love her storyline too. And I love her interactions with this snooty prince. And it's just so good. And the entire story takes place in the cold winter with all this magic going on. I feel like it's really, really great. It's atmospheric. It's perfect for this time of year. But also the writing is stunning. And finally, the pièce de résistance. The favorite of this entire list. Well, I don't know, because I really liked The Ocean at the End of the Lane too. But a favorite in general. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, she's recommending The House in the Cerulean Sea for like the millionth time. TJ Klune created this, and essentially what he created was a warm hug. If you don't think you need a warm hug right now, I'd beg to differ because I feel like everyone could use a warm hug, you know? Especially like during this time of year. It's like freezing outside. This book is following Linus, and Linus is a case study worker. His job is that he goes to different locations where there are children who are orphans who have magical abilities, and he has to report to the government. This is basically our world if we recognize that children have magical abilities and like some people have magical abilities and we are regulating them. We're keeping tabs on them, if you will. He loves his job and he loves kids because he really thinks that he's doing the right thing by checking on these kids. He really thinks that he's helping these children out and making sure that they are safe. And he has a really, really good heart. He's just a play by the rules kind of a guy. One day he is called by the top people in his job and he is sent on a secret mission to the house in the Cerulean Sea, which is a magical orphanage on a little island. He has to go there because the government fears that the children there could cause the destruction and the end of the world, which means that one of the orphans is the Antichrist. You end up caring for every single one of the children at this orphanage, and it's also about Linus's relationship with the orphan's caretaker, whose name is Arthur Piranesi. It will absolutely break your heart at times and you will get incredibly invested in the characters. Also, I would say that this is not a fast moving plot. So if you are somebody who is looking for something that's going to be very, very packed with action and adventure, this might not be for you. I think that's like the main criticism I've heard is that it's a little bit more of like a slow moving plot, but I just loved it so very much. I definitely think it deserves to be on anybody's list of well-written adult fantasy standalones. And that is it for this list, you guys. Those are all 10 books that I recommend. I would love, love, love to hear from you guys though. What fantasy books do you recommend? Please let me know down below in the comments. Whether it's a series or adult or YA or middle grade, I would really, really love to know any recommendations because especially in 2022, I have a really, really big goal of wanting to read more fantasy. But I think that is it. If you have made it to the end of the video, I would love for you to leave me a fantasy emoji. Leave me the dragon emoji. And if you don't have a dragon emoji, leave me any fantasy related emoji down below in the comments. And with that, I will go ahead and close this video out and I will see all of you very soon in the next video. So until next time, book lovers, keep your head in the clouds and your heart in a book, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye.
Hey, Santa. The city is covered in snow tonight. Where did my love go? Santa, I'm waiting for him, but his